Welcome to the D&D Fitness Radio podcast, brought to you by your hosts, Don Saladino from New York City and Derek Hansen from Vancouver, Canada.
Great. So let's talk. Obviously, we are going to be going in the brain health direction. I'd like to maybe start off. Well, let's just jump right into right now and have you give a little bit of background, give your bio, and then we'll take it from there.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm a neurophysiologist. So I was born and raised in Australia. I was a triathlete growing up. I ended up securing a position on the Australian team. So I raced at Beijing and London. During that time, I was also studying immensely. I feel like I've always been studying. I did a teaching degree, and then I went into medicine. And now I live in New York City, the city of dreams. I do that because we're going through, I don't know when everyone's going to listen to this, but we're going through this dust storm, if you will. And now I work with elite athletes from NBA, Major League Baseball, and tennis. And I work solely on, I would say their brain, but also their human performance. I'm doing things such as VO2 max, blood work, everything.
So, I mean, it is, listen, I find this probably the most interesting topic, right? Because so many people are so obsessed with these aesthetic improvements. So it's like at a certain point, like, come on, like our internal organs, our brain, all these things are what we really should be paying attention to. How did you choose to get into this? Because it's not necessarily something you hear most people saying that they're an expert in, or this is the route that they want to go in, right? I mean, this is more of a topic. What I'm trying to say, this is more of a topic I think we have been hearing about over the last decade.
Yeah, well, look, I got into this because I was seeing, first of all, Alzheimer's disease patients, and I was responsible for doing their EEG scans. So it's one of those caps that you put on your head, and you've got all these leads coming out of it, and it tests the functionality of your brain. So it looks at brain waves. And, you know, it's funny, we don't think about this. We've all got a brain, right? But why is this person's brain about to go into the early onset Alzheimer's disease state, and this brain isn't? So I started asking these questions, and then out of nowhere, I'm like, well, what if I started scanning the brains of people who, you know, were just healthy and normal, like athletes? Like, let's scan the brains of these athletes. So nobody was doing it back then. And I found out that, like, there's a whole different realm to human performance. Like, yes, you go to the gym to look good, and we know that it's, you know, quote unquote, we should be going to the gym because it makes us, you know, it's healthy, we need to do it. But it turns out that unless you have a really good performing brain and cardiovascular system, it doesn't matter what you look like. You know, I've seen people that look great, but then you look at their labs and it's just terrible. And you look at their heart health and then their brain health, and it's just terrible. It's like, well, what's the point of having a good body if you're probably going to die sooner? So I wanted to reverse that and work from the inside out, because your brain and nervous system governs everything you do, from who you are to what you do to the person that you are currently in a relationship with, to your work, to your thinking. Every single thing that you are today is a result of how your brain and nervous system is functioning. So it was pretty just, you know, scientific and mathematical to me. And then on the other hand, I was at the highest level of my sport. So triathlon, it's swim, bike, run. You have to be proficient in all three. And I was hitting a plateau, and you would know this, Don, like, you know, when you overtrain, I was training 40 hours a week, which that's so ridiculous. And so I was looking at hacks. This was 12 years ago. How can I get better? I can't train more. Physically, I could not train more. So what could I do to get better and not do it in a, you know, I wasn't going to take illicit drugs. So what could I do? So I'm like, maybe if I train my brain, I'll get better. So that's how this all started.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm always wondering about is you'll hear more about brain health issues, whether it's dementia, whether it's the result of concussions, traumatic brain injury. Are things getting worse? Like, are we finding these things because of some habits we have, some environmental issues, or are we just more aware of what's going on now?
Both. So unfortunately, when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, so first of all, dementia is the umbrella term that's used for these neurodegenerative diseases like frontotemporal dementia, vascular dementia, Alzheimer's disease. Now, Alzheimer's disease is the most prominent one. So many people are affected by this. And it turns out there's around 30 genes involved in Alzheimer's disease. However, most of them are risk genes, meaning that we're now seeing like a worldwide epidemic of these Alzheimer's disease cases. But if you zone in on the genetic profiles of these people, you find out that 95% of them don't have the genetic risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. So why are they getting Alzheimer's disease if they don't have the genes for it? And that's led many scientists and doctors to say, well, it's got to be through lifestyle factors, poor sleep, poor, even negative thinking, stress, lack of exercise. These all things are contributing to poor brain health, which then contributes to your risk in Alzheimer's disease. So it's not like Huntington's disease, right? If you've got a mutation on chromosome 4, you're going to get Huntington's disease, and we know that. And that's unfortunate, but that's how it is. You can't change it. But for brain health, you can change it. So I think it's because we're completely stressed. Look, I was born and raised in Australia near a beach. And, I wasn't that stressed there. I come to New York City, it's like, I feel like I'm in the Hunger Games. Like every single morning I wake up, a backpack on, and it's like, I'm running around the city. It's always stressful, high levels of cortisol. It's hard to maintain I hate to say this, but it's really difficult in this city to be really healthy, right? Lack of sleep, there's noises everywhere, there's lights everywhere, there's indulgences everywhere, there's restaurants. So it's hard.
Right. I mean, we've been exposed to this, right? I mean, you go on vacation, you suddenly put your phone down, you suddenly don't have access to the internet as much. You kind of lose yourself a little bit. And then people start discussing, well, my body feels amazing. And you're like, all right, well, you're not sitting as much, and you're not, exposed to all that blue light, and you're not exposed to this high paced environment. All this stuff we know, obviously it exists. It is so valuable, and most of us aren't paying attention to it enough. Where do you think someone should start? So in the last few minutes, you were talking about analyzing the brain, but on the other hand, like, is that an expensive process to go through? Is that something everyone should be going through? Or is there a protocol that, you can recommend, or is there a starting point that you can recommend for people to really start, embarking on?
The first thing we need to understand is there's three areas of lifestyle that we can all take into place immediately without any cost. Okay, I call them Mother Nature's gifts. And they sit on a pyramid. And I describe it as, so the biggest thing that you can do for your brain, the best thing is exercise, but not just any type of exercise. I argue with my parents. My mum the other day said, I've got them on a strict exercise regime, and she missed her PT appointment, personal training appointment. And she was like, but it's fine. I was doing the gardening. And I said, that's great, but that's not exercise. So we have to decide, well, what exercise is good for the brain? And it turns out that low level cardio, specifically zone 2 cardio for around 3 hours per week, is sufficient enough to have better brain health outcomes. So zone 2 is like when you're around 60 to 65% of your maximum heart rate. I usually prescribe this in 45-minute increments. So if you're doing, or even 1 hour, it's tedious, but just get on a bike, get on a treadmill, and just do 1 hour at a time, 3 times a week. Brilliant. But then we've also got resistance training. So important, And one thing I'll point out for resistance training is you have to make sure you are working at around 80% of your 1 repetition max. So I don't know if you've gone over this with your guys, but go with a qualified professional, do a deadlift, figure out how much weight you can push in just one rep, and that would be your one repetition max. Then you get 80% of that. So let's just say, argument's sake, it's 100 kilos. Then you want to be working at 80% of that, which is 80 kilos, and using that as your benchmark for when you do resistance training.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that 80% mark, Derek. I mean, even from a strength and conditioning standpoint, it always, to me, like, those are very safe places to live in. Zone 2.
It's not easy though.
No, it's not easy, but zone 2 for me is very safe. It's very like, okay, like I'm building that engine. It's not so intense, but it's work. Like I could do zone 2, work up a sweat, but it actually, to me, feels like the most comfortable, right? And resistance training at 80%, I always feel like with all the additional stresses going on in people's lifestyle, 80% is a safe place to be. If you want to get stronger, making sure you're not overreaching. Very rarely are we getting hurt at 80%. Rarely. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. So I actually love those recommendations in general for training someone's aerobic system and training someone's improvement in strength. But now you're saying this is for this is a beneficial for brain health. Fantastic. Now let's say this. Let's say someone, when you said 45 minutes to an hour, what if we were to break that down into 6 30-minute sessions? Are you still okay with that? Or are you really feeling, has signs pointed in the direction of saying, no, it has to be a minimum of 45 minutes?
Has to be. Oh, look, it's fine. Look, anything, if you've got 30 minutes, then that is better. But if you really want to work on that overall longevity and get yourself to that 100-year mark, let's just say, it's better off doing the 1-hour sessions. Now, as part of that aerobic system, is we want to have a really tall peak, which is cardiorespiratory fitness. So although your zone 2 is, I call it building the base, you're building the engine, right? The engine, the endurance engine, we need that. So that's going to keep you going for longer. But we also need to improve our VO2 max. So VO2 max is a measure of your cardiorespiratory fitness. And it declines every decade, which is scary. Like I'm talking like a huge decline every decade past the ages of 40. So we need to be working on that. So how do we work on that? Well, science says at least to maintain your VO2 max, you need to be doing at least 20 minutes per week, which can be cut up into 5-minute intervals if you want to. Doesn't matter. You just do 20 minutes and that's at that peak. Like I'm talking like zone 4, zone 5, like to the point where you feel like you're going to die.
Sick. Yeah. I was there. I was there on Monday and it's man, do you feel great later on? But for about an hour, I know I'm there. I'm monitoring my heart rate, Derek, but you know, you're there when you're drinking water and you feel nauseous for the next hour.
What did you do? How did you work on yours?
I did VersaClimber and
wow.
I actually really love because, I think trying to demand a maximum level of output when you're running, I feel like is somewhat skillful, right? And your body has to be able to handle that maximum level of output. And most people I'm not going to take there, but I was doing it with a friend and we actually did 100-foot races with a lot of rest, like the work to rest ratio, the rest far surpassed. So it might've been an interval of under 20 seconds at 100%, but then we're resting for 3+ minutes. Like you just need it.
Yeah. So. Well, the best, the way that we work with our athletes is a 1-to-1 ratio, and we do it in 4 minutes. So I call it the 4x4x4. So we'll get them doing 4 minutes hard out. I call them spew sessions. So they get to that 4 minutes and they feel like they're going to vomit. Then they have 4 minutes of rest. We repeat that 4 times. That's your session. Yeah. That is 16 minutes. But, if you do that twice a week, even you're working on your peak cardiorespiratory fitness. So that's the first thing. You don't need money for that. No, you don't even need a gym membership. And that's the thing about this. We weren't born, prehistorically, there were no gyms. It was like hunters and gatherers. So you don't need a gym for that. You just need to be able to just do something. So that's exercise.
Well, why I'm just curious, where did the 4 minutes come from, right? Because is it because you're finding that that's the amount of time it takes for someone to get up to that zone 4, zone 5, right?
Correct. Yeah. Because we also don't want, you're not going to go from 0, to zone 5 within, and
20 seconds not going to happen. I mean, it was for me, it was more where my legs couldn't move and I felt like I was going to puke. But again, different strokes for different folks. I was doing it for someone.
Yeah. And then it helps you as well on that last minute. Let's just say you're creeping up to it. Then on the last minute, you're better able to maintain the zone 4, zone 5 if you've like creeped up there. Yeah.
On the other end of the spectrum, so we're talking about minimums. What about when you're working with like an elite endurance athlete or a pro athlete? What's too much? What level of aerobic activity, volume of training starts to negatively affect not just general physiology, but brain physiology?
Yeah, so really good question. And this comes down to recovery, right? So what I'm finding is that most people are actually, the reason why they're not, how you see people right now, it's like me included, people who are not training well, they're like, hey, I'm going to the gym, but nothing seems to be training. We're seeing this influx of people being over recovered and undertrained, right? But for these athletes, they get to if they're doing hard out efforts every single day, they're burning themselves out and they're not recovering, then that's going to end up leading to burnout and a negative effect. However, every single person is different. So it comes down to training and recovery ratio, and we can measure recovery. We can do this qualitatively, like we can give out surveys, questionnaires, we can talk to our athletes, or we can do something like a CO2 tolerance test, which measures their ability to sustain VO2, to sustain carbon dioxide. So we do things like that. And then it's just a basic, if they wake up and they're sore and their HRV is down, we measure them through an Oura ring or a Whoop strap, their HRV is down. It's like, don't push them that day, like learn,
But I was happy that you ended up saying that, because do you feel like a lot of people are relying too much on tech to where they're using it as an excuse? And I am noticing that also, that some people are, my readiness isn't good. And we're like, well, maybe you're out of shape also. Like, what are you finding there?
So what I'd like to tell people is, don't let your wearable be the be all and end all. So if you wake up and you feel incredible and you're like, yeah, I can do it today, but your HRV is down, go out and just listen to your body. But if you wake up and you're lethargic and you just don't feel good, then listen to your body. Just take a rest. It shouldn't be the be all and end all. I think the greatest thing about these is it can pick up on consistencies. So if you're consistently, sleeping and you're in the red zone, I call it on the Oura ring, then let's do something about it. But, it's not the be all and end all.
Love it. Love it.
Are there wearables that are specific to brain health? Obviously, heart rate variability taps into nervous system responses, but is there something that, because I see some stuff now and then, people put it on their head and you're like, I don't know if it's doing anything. Does it get through the skull? Does it, is there anything in your experience that you're like, okay, that's a pretty good way to measure what's going on?
No, the only way to measure that is through a hospital grade EEG. And I've had many companies reach out to me with, hey, Louise, we've got this wearable EEG. I'm like, stop it. I'm like, that's no. And we've got at Neuro Athletics, we actually have our own hospital grade EEG, which is used on like epilepsy patients, right? And that's what you do, standard measure. Here's the thing, if you were able to measure and detect brainwave activity or even structural brain changes in the home, then, an MRI machine costs over $1 million. It's like, well, why would they exist, right? So we have to take that into consideration. Even the accuracy of these wearables is not 100%. It's not 100%. You can go in and get an EKG, electrocardiogram, from a hospital, and that's going to be extremely, bang on. But a wearable is not going to be. Maybe you're looking 80% accuracy. Who knows?
All right, so we jumped into the exercise, what you guys recommended. I'm sure there's a lot of other things out there, but you talked about the 4x4. You talked about zone 2 cardio. You talked about 80% intensity, which makes me really happy, right? That's kind of where I want most people to live at. Nutrition.
Well,
right?
no, let's go up the pyramid. The next most important is sleep.
Yes.
If you are not working on your sleep quality and quantity, it's got to be quality and quantity, then you're doing yourself a disservice. It's one of the most underrated high performance tools that we have. So we know that sleep deprived people experience cognitive decline much faster than someone who is, not sleep deprived. So sleep is fundamentally so incredibly important, especially for the clearance of some of these like toxins that build up during the day. These toxins, one of them is amyloid beta. This is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. This is actually something that is built up in your brain over many, many years. It phosphorylates and clumps together and causes plaques and tangles. So we need to be sleeping. We need to be on top of our sleep game. How do we do this? One thing, the very first place to start with sleep, guys, is just start with maintaining a time zone. So lights out at Neuro Athletics is 10 p.m. We want everyone to sleep by 10 p.m. If you can't do that, that's fine. But sleeping at 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. is going to be the sweet spot, okay? Another general rule, because I understand that everybody is human and people have kids and lives, what you want to stick to is sleeping well 80% of the time, okay? So if you're going to measure your sleep over 10 nights, then we want to make sure that you've 8 nights out of those 10 nights, you've slept really good. The quality and the quantity is there. And then you can have 2 cheat nights. We say cheat meals. I call them, cheat sleep nights, because it's going to happen. I have 2 cheat nights a week, and enables me to be human. I can go out and have some fun.
No, absolutely love that. Now sleep is the one area where I think there's the most amount of question mark on, right? I mean, training for me is easy because we can just, develop a program, see where the individual is working, and then you start kind of embarking down that path. But with sleep, there's so many variables that could contribute to it. Now, I heard you mention that you like Aura. I'm wearing one as well.
You've got one too.
Yeah. I've been working with the company for, I think, 5 or 6 years already. So I'm a huge believer in it. But again, this is to establish behavioral change. And I think Aura is going to even admit not every single piece of data on there is 100% accurate, but I think it really pushes us in the right direction to make better decisions.
And also keep in mind that sleep is, again, it's free. And any emotional issues that you're having as well, emotional regulation happens during sleep. REM sleep, it's like emotional first aid. So many people are going out there and they're blaming their spouse for something, or they're blaming a work colleague, or the way that they interpreted something. When in actual fact, it could be just the fact that you've only slept 5 hours. And that would make anybody cranky. So sleep is more than just sleep. It's the foundation of health.
And how about that lead up to that 10 p.m. Going to bed time? Is there like a taper that you want to see in terms of like, hey, don't watch any exciting movies, obviously the screen time issue, exercise? Like, do you want to have a buffer so that you're getting ready and you're not like doing serious math problems like the right before?
Yeah, you want to be warming up for sleep. So that means that you want to have your last meal 90 minutes before you go to bed, because digestion takes 90 minutes. So we need to make sure that we're not digesting as we go to sleep. You want to make sure that you're not exercising too hard within 3 or 4 hours of sleep. That's why I always say exercise when the sun's up. Then maintaining a very dark environment. So using blackout curtains or even an eye mask can help block out light at night. And just your regular things, not staring at a TV screen if you can, dimming the lights. Last night I had a terrible sleep. I had a 3 a.m. exam. It was the worst. And I thought, you know what, I'll have a nap. Okay, so I slept from 10. I put my alarm for 2. I woke up, I felt disgusting. And then I ended up finishing the exam at 5:30 in the morning. So I had another sleep. So my sleep was completely distraught last night. So that's part of my cheat meal. So you have to learn how to understand your own body. and also understand what works for you.
It's amazing how much the blue light or just light in general, the stimulation affects the sleep quality, right? I mean, and I've been really diving into this over the last 5-6 years. And anytime I'm off my phone or I'm outside and we're like barbecuing and we're not exposed to our phones, 10 out of 10, not 9 out of 10 times, 10 out of 10 times, I see a significant difference in my overall sleep quality. What do you think about the blue? What's your, do any blue light blocking glasses actually work? Because I've used a couple of pair and I've not seen anything significant on it. What's your opinion on that?
No, it's unfortunately, I wear them. Okay. It may help maybe by 1%, but no, because during the day, your eyes become weak because they've been open, right? They're getting so much sunlight. So at nighttime, they become more fatigued, just like your muscles. So therefore, if any light comes through, it's going to even be harder for your retina to say, no, don't come through. So blue light blocking glasses are not going to really help with that. Basically, your brain says, I see light, therefore I am awake.
Huh. I knew you were going to say that, even though I asked it. I'm yet to find a really good pair. Derek, anything?
Yeah, we talked about general exercise for brain health. Are there specific exercises for your brain? Like I said, maybe there's like you do crossword puzzles, maybe you play a musical instrument, because there's obviously different areas of the brain that you can affect. Is there anything you would recommend on a prevention level to exercise your brain? I know I read somewhere that they're saying like, hey, we all want to create a cognitive reserve so that when everybody's going to have decline, so you just want to fall from a higher place. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's actually a really great point. So that's what Neuro Athletics actually is. So we do brain training. Literally, it's like weights for your brain. Anyone can do this. Several things, like getting a handball, for example, and throwing it to the wall. It sounds like so simple, but it is just so effective for the brain because you're taking in cognition, right? You've got hand-eye coordination, you've got gripping strength, you've got stability because you have to stand there and catch the ball, and it's actually mentally enduring. So standing a meter away from the wall, overhand grip, throwing the ball to the wall with the right hand, see how far you can get in a minute. Then try the left hand and then alternate, do right hand, catch with the left hand, throw to the wall with the left hand, catch with the right hand. Things like this, crossword puzzles, okay. Anything that's going to create a bit of a mental sweat, like it's got to be mentally enduring, is going to create a response.
What about, all right, so, because I know there's so many areas that we can cover on sleep, but is there anything else you want to add, or should we jump right into nutrition now?
Let's go into nutrition. This is one that I don't, I'm not a nutritionist. I don't delve into it, but there are some things that we know are really good for the brain. For example, omega-3 fatty acids. Most of us are most likely, we're not reaching the amount of EPA and DHA that we should be having. So omega-3 fatty acids come from fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, and the fatty acids are cut up into 3 parts. You've got EPA, DHA, and ALA. Now, the EPA and DHA, that's the one that's coming from the actual fish. The ALA comes from like a marine source. You've got flax seeds and chia seeds. The EPA and the DHA is what is extremely important for the brain. So we all know that our brain is made of fat and water, and the fat component is comprised of DHA. So we have to be feeding our brain high levels of EPA and DHA. Where in terms of dosages, we're dosing our athletes with 4 grams per day. So 2 grams of EPA, 2 grams of DHA per day. You can find this, I use Momentous supplements. You can even do an omega-3 index test, which measures the amount of omega-3 in a red blood cell. Okay, that's the first part of nutrition that I want to talk about. The second part is, and I'm talking about supplementation here, okay? I'm not talking about specific diets.
Sure.
Creatine. Creatine is the bodybuilding drug. It's the most safest supplement on the market. It's the most widely studied, the most effective, and the cheapest. And most people are having it for their bodies, but it is just so important for the brain because it helps in cell energy metabolism, right? It helps you produce cellular energy. That's what creatine does. We can get this from meat, for example, but our brain needs all the energy it can get. And of course, we decline as we get older, especially if you've had a stroke or if you've had, or if you're over the age of 40 or you've had a concussion. You've got, lower energy stores. So you need to be dosing with at least 5 grams of creatine per day.
So do you actually recommend that for people who have strokes?
Yeah, my dad had one in 2019. Yeah, I've got him on creatine.
Oh, that's interesting. A buddy of mine just had a stroke. He's in
his
60s.
No.
Yeah, it's a shame. Yeah. He's going to be fine, but you start wondering about brain health and what that can do. Because so one thing that we have been hearing over the last 5 years, it is one of the most highly researched supplements on the market. I think there's a big misconception on the effects of creatine, how it's actually in raw, uncooked meat, how it's actually in our meat. But what about in reference to, and this might be a little off topic, but adolescents? Are we also, is that safe for children to start supplementing, or is there an age that you start recommending that at?
Look, I generally wouldn't, I don't recommend anything under the age of 18. So there's many things, that can stunt growth in young kids, like melatonin, for example. I would never recommend that for any kids under the age of 12. And I don't deal with kids, so everything I'm saying is recommended for adults. But yeah, so those two, and then keeping up with hydration. Our brain cells need adequate electrolytes to perform and to function properly. And when we sweat, we're not just sweating out water, we're sweating out selenium, potassium, sodium. These are electrolytes. Magnesium, we have to be replacing them. We have to be replacing them with, water, but also I use element sachets. You should be replacing your electrolytes per day. Even if you're not sweating, your brain still needs adequate amount of electrolytes.
Right. Okay.
How about supplementation for things like neurotransmitters and you've seen that a lot where people are like, oh, you could take this, and this, and it's going to help your cognition and even your athletic performance. I know there was a phase there where they were really pushing them.
Like what type? Because they're the two supplements that are probably the best. And then you've got things like B vitamins, right? B12 is, extremely important for brain health. And, this all comes down to go and get your bloods done. If you've got a high homocysteine, that's, we need to really bring that down and drive that down through methylated B vitamins. You just don't know where you're sitting yet until you have a blood test done. In terms of neurotransmitters, so these are just chemicals that are released, during the synapse phase of two brain cells meeting each other. Serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. I don't know if you're, if you're going to do yourself any good by having any. The only one that I would recommend is GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid, which is our chief inhibitory neurotransmitter. So this inhibits the action of these synapses, and it can help us fall asleep at night. If you've got a racing mind, you don't have that during the day. But other things like supplementing with, things that are helping with our neurotransmitters, I don't think so. Parkinson's disease, what happens in these patients is they have a lower efficacy of dopamine that gets secreted. So then we would dose them with L-dopamine. So, yeah.
In terms of blood screening, sorry, Don, you talked about blood screening. I know there's companies that do that. Is there something or a company that you'd recommend, or is there a profile that you'd look for? Because I know it's pretty wide open. If I go to a regular physician, I'll get a screening of my blood, but are there specific things around brain health that I could look at?
You want to be looking at a lipid panel. That's extremely important. Your LDL, particle number, ApoB, Lp(a), genetic risk factor. And the reason I say lipids is because one of the biggest things that you can be doing for brain health is blood flow to the brain and making sure that those arteries are not narrowing and getting clogged. So that happens through high cholesterol. So getting a lipid panel, checking homocysteine for sure. And then you can't really do that. You can't really do anything else for brain health via blood work. So that's when it comes down to cognitive assessments.
What about discussing some things that are probably in our everyday life that we need to start thinking about eliminating, that is going to really help reduce the risk of specific brain diseases, right?
Yeah.
Just some basic, very easy things, some takeaways that people can leave here with saying, this is more of a reason for me not to consume this.
People are going to hate it, but I'm going to say it. Alcohol is probably the worst thing you can do for your brain. It's funny, every time I say this, I get an uproar of people just getting mad at me. And I'm going to just clear some questions, because people will say, but Louisa, how do you explain the people in Sardinia who drink wine all day? It's like people in Sardinia, and also my grandparents in Cyprus, I just went and visited them, 98, and they're talking to me like they're not like just functioning well. They had alcohol, they like their wine, but the difference is they're not stressed. They're eating from the ground. They're not having processed food. They're not looking at screens. So you have to take all that into consideration. There is not one scientific study that says that you benefit from having alcohol. In saying that, 1 glass of wine per week probably won't do anything to you. But it's when you reach the 2 glasses, 3 glasses, 4 glasses in a week. And so eliminate alcohol if you can. Evidently eliminate smoking if anyone's still smoking. I don't know if that's a thing anymore. Sorry, it's just died. Then the next thing would be natural sunlight, and then sticking to your exercise, sleep, and hydration goals.
All right. So, sorry, Garrett, go ahead, buddy.
Oh, no, if you got something to continue that stream, I was just going to ask about your experience, Louisa, with concussion management with athletes. How you manage that?
Yeah, so very controversial topics, so concussion really relies on, the velocity at which you get hit, right? If you've been slammed in the head and you've been completely concussed, that's a different protocol that you'll take. However, what we know is that within the first 48 to 72 hours, that's the most important phase of a concussion. So getting high dose ketones, okay, first and foremost, to an athlete's brain is going to serve them well. We know that a ketogenic diet would, help with post-traumatic insults like this. Then something that's really profound is doing cold therapy. So cold therapy like ice baths, huge. There's a lot of science that goes around it. We know that when you get into the ice, you are getting a massive release of norepinephrine. That's a neurotransmitter involved in vigilance and focus. So it's really good for you. It helps the healing process as well. Within a 48 to 72 hour time frame, you'd want to cool your brain as well. So if you could, what I've done is I've experimented with a snorkel, and I put some people in buckets, and I get them brain freeze, and I don't even let them come out of the water. I'm they've got a snorkel. So we do that with our athletes with a snorkel. It's insane. I did it, and I was like, this is not for me. Yeah.
That's amazing. Just rounding back to the discussion on alcohol. What have you guys found with THC so far? Because a lot of states are starting to legalize it. Is it the same process where it's killing too many brain cells? Not good. Exactly.
Yeah, it's not helping you sleep. Okay. So I have to keep telling my players this. I'm like, it's not helping you sleep. It's sedating you. That's what THC is doing. Just like what alcohol does. You know how you're like, but alcohol makes me feel like it doesn't. It's actually sedating you. So, when you go into surgery, and the exam I had last night was a surgical exam, you get pumped depending on, what surgery you're having,
you'll get pumped intravenously with propofol. Okay, that's a sedative.
Yeah.
It's to knock you out. Exactly the same on a low level as what ethanol and THC is doing. It's knocking you out. It's not putting you into sleep. So you're not reaching the sleep stages of deep sleep and REM sleep. So it's not helping you sleep. And actually, it's scary because ongoing use can lead to hallucinations and psychosis. You just don't want to get involved in that.
Yeah, a lot of people are asking about it recently, which is why I brought it up.
I wanted to extend that. Like I was talking to a friend, and he's like, "Oh, I'm having trouble sleeping," and so, "Oh, I'm taking sleeping pills," and I'm like, "No, get off of that." Because
same thing.
Yeah, it's like an artificial state, right?
Sedative.
Yeah.
What about magnesium and melatonin? I know the differences, but can you discuss if magnesium is actually acceptable?
Yeah, so the best magnesium, I take it every night. It puts me into such a deep sleep. It's magnesium L-threonate. Out of all the magnesiums, so you've got citrate, malate, biglycinate. The L-threonate is the one that penetrates the central nervous system. So the others, we have this protective layer of cells, and it's called the blood-brain barrier. And that just allows for, molecules to not get in and pass through, which is good. We need that. But this one gets through, and when it does, it relaxes us. So L-threonate to fall asleep is amazing. Melatonin is a completely different thing that we're talking about now. Melatonin is actually a hormone, the same as testosterone and estrogen. It is a hormone, so it gets naturally secreted from the pineal gland in response to darkness. So as soon as it's dark outside, your pineal gland's like, oh, it's getting time to sleep. I'm going to release melatonin to get us sleepy. And what's happening is, because we're exposed to light when the sun's down through the television or the computer screen, we are thinking, well, I'll just take some exogenous melatonin. And they did a study on the labels of melatonin in the US. And what they found is that it may say 3 grams or 5 grams or 10 grams, but in actual fact, there's 100 times the amount per capsule. So it's so dangerous. So you're basically pumping your body full of this synthetic hormone. And it's actually so unregulated that it's scary. In Australia, you need a prescription for melatonin under the age of 60. It's just like saying, I want to, just for anybody who's taking it, it's like saying, going to the pharmacy saying, could I just get a bottle of testosterone? You can't do that. So why can we do it with melatonin? So
it makes no sense.
It makes no sense. So it is a hormone. The only time I ever take melatonin, the only time, if I do, is if I'm traveling. I travel, to and from Australia. I'll take it just to get back on, New York time zone.
Right.
It's the only time I'll ever take it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it scares me. It's not something that I've ever actually taken, but I was shocked one day because my son was having trouble, and he's young, he's 14. He was having trouble sleeping. I think it was just because of the mattress, or maybe something that he was able to shake. Yeah, it was some bullshit, exactly. But he grabbed a bottle of melatonin, which I told him to put back on the shelf, and he was ready to. He's like, well, I heard this is good for sleep. And I'm like, where'd you hear that from? He's like, TikTok. I'm like, Jesus, Donnie. I'm like, come on, it's not his fault, right? But it is, I find it dangerous.
Yeah, tell him to stay away from it. It stunts the growth of kids as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Don, did you ever take, like, back in the day, there was a supplement called ZMA, it was zinc magnesium?
I never took it.
Oh, okay. It was like a Victor Conte supplement. He created it, right?
I never took it.
Yeah. Anyways, I found it useful for sleep.
I never did.
Yeah. So
the best thing you can do for sleep is just relax your brain.
Wind down. 100%. Yeah. Well, listen, we've definitely hit, I mean, that was 45 minutes very quickly. Can you do me a favor? Let everyone know about, now you have, what were you saying earlier? I'm going to get it. You have a course that you're launching, right? Can you explain that for a second?
Well, yeah, we do we've got a certificate that we do in person, and it's called the Neuro Athletics coaching certificate. We do this, we've done over 350 trainers now, and we do this in a 2-day workshop, but now we're going to be doing a smaller version and just putting out a course where you can learn this stuff, literally like a course on brain health, and that will be available by the end of this month. So that's super exciting.
That's fantastic. Can you do me a favor? Can you share with me some of the assets? Because I would love to promote that, because that's something as coaches, I think, Derek, we should be promoting.
Yeah.
That's magic. That's magical.
Definitely.
And in reference to social media, let everyone know website, social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, so it's Louisa Nicola with an _ at the end on Instagram. I'm very active on there. And then you can find my podcast, which Don was on 2 episodes ago, the Neuro Experience. So it's on all major platforms. And we now have YouTube. I've got a very small amount of people, 3.4K, growing. But YouTube is, it's great, because now I'm going to be just getting on there and just educating, really, just like this.
Listen, keep leading by example, right? I mean, the thing that really impressed me about you is that how passionate you are about an area that I think we're really undervaluing, or a lot, most Americans are, at least, are undervaluing. Everyone's so into this for the aesthetic goals, where the reality is everything that you're telling people to do right now can improve your aesthetic goals, right? I mean, what did you really say? Improving sleep, training in zone 2, 80% with your resistance training, nutritionally, DHA, all the stuff that your fish oil, all these things that you're talking about is what I would tell someone who's looking for body composition to change anyway. It's fantastic how you're delivering this message. And I really think it's fantastic on how you're educating people. So again, I'm a huge fan of yours. Remember that. Anything I can ever do to help out in any which way, just message me and we'll make sure that we get it done.
Likewise. Thanks, Don. And thank you so much, Derek. I really had fun with this.